Hello everyone, welcome back. So in today's video, I want to show you my favorite method for joining granny squares. This is called the flat seam slip stitch method. That's so hard for me to say. Flat seam slip stitch, and it's because you just make slip stitches and it ends up in this perfectly flat seam along your granny squares. It's so beautiful. That's why it's my favorite. Okay. So I'm going to be using a contrasting color of yarn so that you can see the stitches in there. But if you were doing this to, make a blanket or something, you might want to use the same color. That way your seam does not take away from all the beautiful work you've put into your granny squares. But on the other hand, you may want to use this seam as kind of an accent color. So like in this case, the pink matches the pink in here. So it is up to you. You as the designer of your beautiful crochet piece, you get to decide what you want it to look like. So to get started with this method, I'm going to make a little slip knot and attach it to my hook. And now we're going to get started with this method. Are you ready? I'm going to slip this off my hook. The first thing we're going to do is take a look at our granny square. Now, this is important, y'all, okay? In this demonstration, I'm using granny squares that have 2 chains in each corner. If you had granny squares that had 3 chains in each corner, this method would be a little bit different because as you get to the crossover point, you'd have an odd number and you'd have to slip stitch in one side, slip stitch on the other side, and it gets a little bit tricky. So for this method, yes, for this tutorial, the granny squares have 2 chains in the corner, okay? An even number, and that makes it much easier. So just so you know. All right, so we're gonna get started with the first little corner, and like I said, there are 2 chains here. So you're going to find the second chain and then the second chain across from here. Now, the first chain would be the one that we're gonna count that as the other side. So if you have 2 chains, kind of one belongs to one side and then one belongs to the other side, right? So we're going to get to the chains that are on the sides, kind of touching each other. So I'm going to slip my hook into the back loop only of my first one. And then I'm going to slip my hook into the back loop only of my next chain there. And now I'm going to grab that little slip knot that I just made, and I'm going to pull it up. Now this part gets the tiniest bit tricky because you gotta kind of turn your hook a little bit to get it through those little loops. But that is all. There we go. Now we're all connected. We've got those first little chains connected, and now we're going to start our little method. So, I mean, that kind of started it, but we're going to continue on. So now we're going to go into the back loop only of the first double crochet on one side, and then the first back loop only of the double crochet that's exactly across from it. And now we're going to grab our yarn. We're going to yarn over, and now we're just going to slip stitch through those. So 1, 2, whoop, and 3. So we're pulling through the 2 little loops that we just went through, and we're pulling through the loop that's on our hook. And you can see we've got 1 little chain there, 1 little slip stitch. Now we're going to go down into the back loop of the next double crochet, back loop of this next double crochet, and then yarn over, and then we're going to pull through all 3 loops on our hook once again. So 1, and this is where you got to kind of like turn your hook to get it through. Then once you're through, you're good. Now we've got 2. And we're going to do the next double crochet now, through the back loop, through the back loop. Now we're going to yarn over and pull through all 3. 1, 2, 3. There we go. That one went a little smoother. Once you get it going, it gets a little easier. But you'll notice the yarn always stays behind my granny squares so that I can pick it up. So it's always back there. right, now on to the next one. Now the next one is a chain. It's the little chain in between the 3 double crochets of the granny square. So I'm going to go into the back loop of one chain, up, and into the back loop of the next chain. Now I'm going to yarn over and pull it through all 3. 1, 2, 3. And now we've got 4 connected. So we've got our chains and 3 double crochets. Now we're on to our next chain. So now we're on to our next double crochet. So in through the back loop, in through the other back loop, pick up our yarn and bring it through all 3 loops. Now you're just going to continue on all the way until you get to the corner. So just continue on up, and then I'll show you what we do at the corner. All right. All right, now I've gone all the way up the side, all the way up each of the double crochets and the little chains in between, and now I'm at a little crossing here where I've got two chains and 2 chains. Okay, so now I'm going to go into the chain on one side, into the first chain. I split my yarn. Oh, there we go. Okay, we're in that chain, into the chain on the next side. Now I'm going to yarn over and go 1, 2, 3. Now I'm not going to go into the next 2 chains because those are going to be worked when I'm coming up this way, okay? So instead, if I've got another row of double crochets to do, or I mean another row of granny squares to do, oh my goodness, you guys, we're going to just lay those down and get started with the next ones. And so we'll start these ones just like we started in the beginning. We're going to find the chain that's along this side and the chain that's along this side. So not the first ones, those are going to be along the bottom. I'm going to pick these chains. I'm going to go in one side, in the next side. I'm going to yarn over and pull through 1, 2, 3. Just like that. And now we've got our next little granny squares connected. Isn't that so pretty? Flat seam slip stitch join. That's a mouthful. Okay, now we're going on to the next. It's going to be double crochets, back loop only on the first side, back loop of the next side, yarn over and pull through all 3. 1, 2, 3. One side, the next side, and a 1, 2, 3. And you're just going to continue that all the way up until you get to your next little corner spot, and then do the exact same thing. So I'm going to continue up here, and then I will meet you guys. Let's see, once the side is all done, because I want to show you how we're going to connect them in the other direction now. All right. I will see you there. Back loop, yarn over, 1, 2, 3. All right, so now once we've got all our granny squares joined in one direction and we've moved over and we've joined all our granny squares in the next one and all the way on and on and on and on, all the way up your blanket, you're gonna wanna turn it and join it in the other direction. So now, let me grab some scissors and snip my yarn, and we're gonna continue up in this direction. Snip. Leave a little bit of a tail for weaving in later on. Now, we've got our little granny squares facing in this direction, and we're going to do the same thing that we did before. So let's make a little slip knot. So now we've got the chain on one side and the chain directly across on the other side. We're going to go in the back loop only. And the back loop only. Now we're going to grab that. Now, you want to make sure that your yarn stays on the back of your work. So don't pull it up this way because it'll be on top of this, right? We want to make sure that we're underneath. And we're going to grab our little slip knot and go 1, 2. All right. And we're connected. So now we're going to go on one side, on the next side, grab our yarn. You can see it under there. We're gonna go one side, and one side. There we go. Oh, am I off the screen? Oh no. Scoot in there. Okay. Through the back loop. Through the back loop. Grab your yarn back there. 1, 2, 3. And our last double crochet of this little chunk here, yarn over, 1, 2, 3. Now we're going into the chain, one side, the other side, yarn over, 1, 2, 3. And one side, yarn over, 1, 2, 3. And of course, you're just going to go all the way up until you get to that little transition area where we're joining our next 2 squares, right? So keep on going up. This looks so pretty. I do think that the contrasting color of yarn is very pretty too. Imagine if it just was, it's just matching a beautiful color in your squares and it was just a beautiful accent. Or you could do solid colored squares and then have this seam in another color. I just think it makes a very beautiful little seam there. Oh. Okay, we're gonna try that one over again. It is tricky with your yarn behind. Okay, there we go. 1, 2, 3. And then one side, but it has to be, the yarn has to stay behind though, because if you had it on top, it would make a real tricky, weird thing going on there once you get to the transition. So just trust me. Yep. Through one side, other side, yarn over, 1, 2, 3. Almost there. Through one side, 1, 2, 3. Through one side, 1, 2, 3. All right, we're almost to that little transition. 1, 2, 3. I'm going through the last couple of double crochets, yarn over, 1, 2, 3. Okay. Now we've got a chain on this side, then over the other side, chain on this side, chain on this side. So we're going to be working in those unworked chains, and they might be a tiny bit difficult to see, but if you look at the chains that were worked this way, you can find the chains that are next to them going this way. So here's one and there's one. don't know if you can see that. Ooh, but there's one right there, and then there's one right there. So that's what we're going into. So let me grab my loop again. So we're going to go through the back loop, through the back loop. I'm going to find my yarn so that I can yarn over. There you are. 1, 2, 3. Okay, now we're going to be jumping over to do the same thing with these unused chains. So you're going to find back loop, yarn over, grab your yarn, there you are, 1, 2, 3. There, and now we're on the other side. Isn't that so beautiful? Okay, so now back loop only, one side, back loop only of the other side, yarn over, 1, 2, 3. And we've made it across. And so that is how you will do the crossroads of each one of your little attached granny squares. And that's all. That was not too bad, huh? And there's my last double crochet on each side, and then into the last chain, one side. There, okay. Let's take a look at what we've done. Oh, it's so pretty. So you can see why it's called the flat seam slip stitch. It's like completely flat, and it's just slip stitches all the way along. So now when you flip it over, you just have a perfect little line too. Just a perfect little line where you've pulled the yarn up each time. So, so pretty. So now, of course, you would cut your yarn and leave a little bit of a tail for weaving in. And then you would do whatever little border you want along your edge, and you would you have your perfect little double crochets and chains to stitch your border in. And then when you come to the corner, you have a chain and then another chain on the other side. And you will have your own method of how you want to do your little border. So, but it makes such a clean, pretty edge there. It just continues on all along. So, all right, I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.